Okay.
I think I am going to try to start. And so here we go to the screen. Are we starting to see what is on the screen?
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to start. We're going to go to a couple of different places. We're going to start in Bangkok. And from Bangkok, we will go to the old city called Ayutthaya, which is the second capital of Thailand. And then we'll end up going to the River Kwai, where the movie The Bridge over the River Kwai was made. And then we'll head to South Vietnam. So if I can get this thing to work. Okay, here we have just a little bit of a feel for a map. You can see where Bangkok is, obviously, and where Thailand is in relationship to Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Myanmar on your left-hand side. So here we are in Bangkok, where I always seem to arrive to start out with and get my brain around things. But they've got one of the more interesting metro systems. This is an above ground rail system that goes all the way around Bangkok, and it's so efficient and so cheap and so fast. But anyway, this is a train station. So in every one of the trains, they have a sign. We obviously aren't privy to having what am I trying to say? The monks, but the priority in seating on a Thai train is the monk first, the old person second, the disabled person third, the woman the fourth, and the child the fifth. So it's very much of a hierarchy, but the number one hierarchical person is the monk. So we ended up taking a train to a very modern shopping area, and this shopping area, as you can see, has all the high end stuff. And my brother is in the blue shirt right there, and his friend Dan is next to him. So just as this is going to be obviously the opposite of what the majority of these pictures are, but this is a super high-end facility in Bangkok that most people can't afford to go to, but it's unbelievable. The extent of it. We think our shopping centers are magnificent, but here is a coffee sitting area that I'm on the third floor looking down to. This is just a sitting area in this shopping center. So in this shopping center, they also have a water feature for, and I couldn't get this all in one shot, but the water comes out of the ceiling that comes down to that black ring that you can see. And I mean, it's the size and scale of these shopping centers in Bangkok are just spectacular. On the third floor, I'm just looking out here at the city of Bangkok. You can see this river going by. This is called the Chao Phraya River. You'll see it again in a little while in a couple of the other pictures, but this is the main river that cuts through the middle of Bangkok. But this is Bangkok in the background. As you can see, it's very modern. But here we are starting to get into the less modern area of Bangkok. So we're right now just walking around in one of the shopping areas that you can see it's just wall to wall people. Here's a picture of a building that is being reconstructed and painted. And I'm showing you this because you're going to understand later on, all of this bamboo is very straight. And so bamboo doesn't always grow straight, but you'll see how they straighten it in a little bit of time. Um, Somebody's trying to come on. Let me see who this is. Okay, can't see it. But here I'm just showing the bamboo, how the structure is put together, because they're being put together by actual ropes that they tie together, which is crazy. again, bamboo ladders, very straight, guys up in the power lines working, which is, I mean, we'd have to have 14 guards around us to make sure nobody steps on the wrong power line, but they've got enough people, they don't care if they fry a couple. So here we start to go into a little bit of history. This is the Southeast Asian part of the world. You can see the empire called the Khmer Empire, and this is a combination of Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, but this is the original, the way that Southeast Asia was broken apart. Pagan is the Burmese area, and Champa became Vietnam, and the empire of the Khmer Empire is the center. Um, so the reason I'm showing you this, you're going to now see this same map, and now you'll see Myanmar, which is Burma, Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, and you got the two stars, the two red stars. The top star is where we're going to go. We will not go, but this is the original capital of Thailand. The second capital was in a place called Ayutthaya, where we're going to go next. And then Bangkok is the third red star. So in this Ayutthaya area, which is the second capital of Vietnam, you can see the Chao Phrao River that I mentioned to you before that cuts through the middle of Thailand. It basically encircled Ayutthaya, which is the second capital of Thailand that most people forget about, but it was the capital for like 500 years. So here is a reconstruction of a temple, and the centerpiece you're going to see in a few minutes. The centerpiece. This was in Ayutthaya, where all the emperors and the kings would put all of their jewels. But this was the center part of Thailand. So here I am standing in front, and you can see in the background that temple there in the background is that temple. And this was an area up until 1767 was the capital of Thailand, and this is called Ayutthaya. And rarely do people go there for whatever reason. It's like 60 miles north of Bangkok, but I was there with maybe 10 other people in this whole facility. But these are all what are called stupas, which are in pagodas, which are temples, remembrances of monks, of emperors that have been built in this area. Again, these are just areas in Ayutthaya. They were places where people lived. These are stupas, pagodas, where you can enter and walk around. I mean, it's an incredible place because it's all these very, very old artifacts of that area. And what you're going to see a lot of is, another one. Okay, admit. What you're going to see is a lot of these temples will have no heads. And I'll explain that in a few minutes because this had to do with a war. So again, this is Ayutthaya, and Ayutthaya is one of those, is the capital. And these are the structures that are all left over from that time period. Again, an inner courtyard in Ayutthaya, and you can see all the Buddhist temple, Buddhist, what am I trying to say? Anyway, the idols that have no heads all the way around the inside of the structure. And it turned out that why the heads were gone, the Burmese ended up attacking the Thais in about 1560, I think it was, and they tried to invade Thailand and they got pissed off. And so when they left, they ended up lobbing off all the heads. And here's a banyan tree. We were talking about banyan trees. My picture in my background is a banyan tree. This is a banyan tree that they put one of the heads of one of the monks inside, and it grew around it. It's just a famous banyan tree in that area. Inside the building that you saw at the beginning, where the emperors stored all of their wares in the early 1900s, they were able to get inside, and they found all of these old artifacts. They've now put in a museum. This is one of the swords from one of the emperors, and what emperor, I have no idea. These are all the gold artifacts that they found in Ayutthaya, because it was which was originally not called Thailand. This was called Siam. But these were all the artifacts from all the different emperors. Again, this is the area of Ayutthaya with the Chao Phraya River going around it. And if you look on your bottom right, I put a star there, and you're going to see in a second a fortress that is right at this intersection here of the two rivers. And so here we are now at that intersection, and you can see in the 1700s, 1700s, after the after the Burmese invaded Thailand, the Thais started to build fortifications. So if they ever came down this river again, they could shoot them. And these are some of the fortifications left from that time period. So they would roll cannons out. So if you came up the river and they didn't want you coming up the river, they would shoot it out at you. But these are fortifications left in that area. This is a little bit of a mishmash of a temple. So when the Burmese came in and invaded Thailand, which is called Siam, they started to build what is called a stupa. And the lower part of this temple is only got finished to that point because they were just going to build a platform. But when the Thais or the people of Siam got this area of Ayutthaya back, they ended up finishing it and put the top piece onto this structure. Anyway, it's a combination of Burmese stupas and a Thai pagoda up top. So when the go ahead, somebody saying this is an interesting, very interesting. In Ayutthaya here again, there is a gentleman who basically got Siam back from the Burmese, and this emperor was called Narsum. Anyway, he's a very famous man in this area, and you'll see these roosters all over the place. And roosters, it turned out that when he was negotiating with the guy in Burma to get Siam, to get the Burmese king to release the Ayutthaya back to the Thais, it came down to a cockfight, and both of these guys had these roosters that they would fight, and the person who won the cockfight would then either, if it was the Burmese that were going to win, they would have kept Ayutthaya, but it turned out this ruler Narusium ended up winning the cockfight, and that's why these cock are all over the place. Because he ended up winning the fight, so that the Thais got their lands back. Anyway, so more history than you want to know, but that's why the roosters are there, because I couldn't figure out why are these roosters all over the place. I mean, it's an unbelievable thing to see, because they're 12, 14 feet tall, and they're all over Ayutthaya. And but this is because Ayutthaya area went back to Siam, which is now Thailand, and it became part of this area. So I left Ayutthaya, which is very worthwhile going to. I ended up now going to what are called the River Kwai, and you'll start to see this. So I woke up in the hotel room, had breakfast on the River Kwai, overlooking the river. So the River Kwai obviously is famous for all of us because this was the time when the Japanese ended up trying to conquer the world, and they went out. And one of the places they tried to overrun was, if you look at Thailand down there, they were looking for a way to get their goods across Thailand to go to India. And so we're looking for a shortcut. And that's why they started to build a railroad so that goods could be taken and taken across the shortcut. So we're now going to go to the River Kwai area. This is the cemetery for the British and English, excuse me, the British and the different people that died. Very few Americans died here, but it was mostly as this is a breakdown of it, how many people died and how many people worked in this area. But they were mostly, as you see, Burmese. 90,000 Burmese were worked on the River Kwai on this railroad, building the shortcut through Thailand. You can see British troops, 30,000 British troops, all the way down, and Americans there were only 700. But it's obviously has great historical significance for the British. And that's where the cemetery that you saw a second ago, those are the majority were British. This is the railway museum that they have for the bridge. So here I am on the bridge, actually, that was built by these people because the prisoners had to hack themselves through these jungles from one end of Thailand to the other, building this railroad for the Japanese. And the railroad is still there. It's just interesting. These are pieces of it. But if you look down at the horrendous conditions that these people had to hack themselves through to build this, there is a train that you can take and that goes along the railroad tracks of where they built it. And so here I am on the train, obviously. This is looking outside of the train, again, looking down at the River Kwai, but you can see the size of that bamboo that they had to hack themselves through to build this railroad. Here's the actual picture of the railroad that the Americans ended up bombing, but the section that got knocked out, they rebuilt, but this was the actual bridge over the River Kwai. So here's what it looks like today. The round structures, the ones that have the round pieces on the top, those are original, and the square ones were the ones that they rebuilt. But this is the actual bridge over the River Kwai. So you can walk across it. The train still goes across it. So we now left the bridge on the River Kwai and we're heading towards Vietnam. We stopped in this town called Ubon Ratchathani, which is just an interesting town. We spent the day. Here's my friend Dave. We walked down to the river to see the fish, why these people were feeding the fish. And it's unbelievable to see as many fish on this river that you could walk up to. I mean, it's so you can see there's lots of food for everybody to eat. I mean, it's the fish are just waiting here, fishing, wanting a tourist to come by and feed them. A quick, as we're heading towards Vietnam, this is what's called the Friendship Bridge. This is a bridge that goes from Thailand to Laos. It's a connection point now. At this bridge, these are the Thais, that sit around in the evening time. They have wonderful evenings to sit around, have dinners. We're flying off to Vietnam now. This is called Vietnam airline called Vietnam airline, obviously. So here we are now heading to Vietnam. You can see I put two arrows, and the first arrow at the top is called Nha Trang. That's as far north as we went in the southern tour of our Vietnam trip. And the far south as we went to is the second, just below the second arrow, and that's called Can Tho, and that's the Mekong Delta area, just to give you a reference point. So here we are in Saigon, which is called either Ho Chi Minh City, which is the old name, excuse me, is the new name. The old name is Saigon. The South Vietnamese still like to call it Saigon, but it's a very metropolitan, amazing river, amazing town. Here we are in Saigon, and it's an interesting thing because there's so many motorcycles, and it's my friend Dave. We're walking along here, and you see these places to stop people from riding their motorcycles or cars on the sidewalks. So it's interesting how they are trying to dissuade people from doing it. A museum, no big deal. Inside the museum, these are artifacts left over from the French and the colonial days, the cannons. This is, for me at least, one of the more interesting things inside this museum. We handcuff people to keep them from moving around and going to places. So in the early days, what the Vietnamese did was put bamboo cages around their necks and let their hands free. Well, you can see, you can't get this bamboo cage around your neck. You're not going to go very far, but you can work all day and you can do everything. I thought it was a really interesting way to confine people. Very old way of doing it, but these were pirates back in the 1800s. So back in Saigon, Saigon is just one giant mess of motorcycles. It's unbelievable how many people are moving on motorcycles. We hired this couple, young couple, to show us around one evening to take us to different eating places. So as where I'm on the back of the motorcycle, I'm taking pictures of these people. It's unbelievable. Again, a whole family on a little moped, not moped, small 100cc motorcycle. I mean, you can see they literally carry everything on these mopeds. An evening out. So they're showing us, what we can eat. This is my favorite food, is street food, that people are making. Here we have snails, which at first I was aghast at, but after I ate a couple of them, I go, God, this is good. It's so good. Garlic and the black beads are actually peppers. Those are black peppers. Anyway, they steam them, but they're absolutely delicious. Downtown Saigon, typical little walkway, all these are restaurants through Saigon. Saigon in Vietnam is very inexpensive for Americans. I mean, here's a breakfast menu. Just for these are in Vietnamese dong, which is their currency. But one Vietnamese dong, there are about 30,000 Vietnamese dong to the dollar. So you can see it's less than $1 for a bread butter. You can see pork rice. It divide by 30,000. It's a buck, $1, $1.50 for us to have breakfast, and it's a good breakfast. Interesting place. I mean, we've got Saigon Jane, obviously left over from Hanoi Jane, but this was a t-shirt shop you see all over Saigon. Again, Saigon, the motorcycles, it's just the most interesting thing because they put everything on these motorcycles. I mean, so much weight. So Dave and I are getting our cleaning. So here we got a little bit of a shave. This is an interesting. So in Saigon, you have Starbucks, and Starbucks, obviously over there, nobody can afford it. but the Vietnamese have their own Starbucks version. It's called Phac Long. But it is very inexpensive. You can see it's a nice place. But here's in the morning time, I had a latte for 40,000 Vietnamese dong. So it's $1.20 for a latte. Well, why would you go over to Starbucks for $4 or $5 and get a latte? So this outfit, Phac Long, they're all over Saigon. So after leaving Saigon, we're now heading south down into what's called the Mekong Delta area. And you can see it, I mean, it's the river, the Mekong River comes through Cambodia, comes down into Vietnam and empties in the ocean. So to get from Saigon to the Mekong, we took a bus, and a bus I'd never seen before, where you walk into it and you lay down. So you go into one of these little cubicles, you lay down, you stretch your feet out. It's air conditioned, you have USB, you have Wi-Fi, everything's available. But it's like it's 2 levels, and it's a long sleeper bus. And so anyway, it's a good way to get down to the Mekong. So we get down by the Mekong and come to a town called Can Tho. And first thing we see is Ho Chi Minh. Obviously, he was the leader of Vietnam for many years. So Can Tho, being in the Mekong Delta area, is way more rural. So you leave Saigon and you've got all the hubbub out in Can Tho and the Mekong. And as we start to head north in a little bit, you'll see this is just a typical Vietnamese woman who is yelling at us, "Would you like a tour? Would you like to be taken around?" She wants to make some money. So one side of the river of this river is very traditional, as you can see the side we're on. The other side is very tourist oriented. So on the side we're on, because my interest is more what do the people do, and you can see this guy is fishing. He's turned his motor backwards because the motor is called a long tail, spins around, and that's how he moves that canoe around. But he's eking out a little living, trying to catch some fish. So we went up one of the little tributaries to see what was up there. And so you can see people living along the side of this tributary, because there's no social money being spent. So people have to, one way or another live. And so these are just not very good pictures, because I was going along, but you can see how people live. I mean, they just barely eke out a living on a piece of dirt. So this is the other side of the river, the tourist side. So the hotel we stayed in is the hotel in the background, relatively inexpensive. So that evening, so you take a river cruise, and the river cruise is free. All you have to do is pay for the food. So we got on board, and there was nobody on board because we got there half an hour before the boat left. But by the time the boat left, the whole boat got filled up with Vietnamese people, and the food's relatively inexpensive. So they take you out on a midnight or late afternoon or evening cruise on the river, and all you do is pay for the food, and the cruise comes along with it. This is looking back at the rich side of the river. So evening time, we're walking around in Can Tho. You can buy as much of this street food as you want. It actually looked pretty good. I was full after eating what I ate, but it's sitting out. What I don't fully understand is it's sitting out in an environment that it's probably 75, 80 degrees, and all this fresh food, fresh seafood. Anyway, I didn't get any Montezuma's revenge. So in Can Tho, this town, we're on the good side again, or the tourist side. And so all of a sudden I see these guys in the river and they're trying to eke out a living. But so they've put out nets. You can see the front boat is putting out the nets and they're going in a circle trying to catch some fish in that river so that they can sell them to the restaurants and do things. So we're at a good restaurant on the good side of town. Very just a nice restaurant. So the next morning we ended up going to a morning market, and this is in Canto. So every morning they sell things, and so they also take some tourists if they want down the river to this market. And so the local people are trying to make some money. So they're selling their wares, whether it happens to be fruit or vegetables or whatever they're selling to people who are coming alongside. Like our boat there, you can see on the right-hand side is there 3/4 of the people are locals who are out shopping for their own stuff, and maybe a quarter of them are people who are there for just to see what's going on. But these are floating markets in Canto that all the locals buy their stuff at. So here was a Vietnamese couple, and this was an amazing thing. They just came up to the side of the boat, and they were selling food, a bowl of rice or a bowl of whatever they were making, but a lunch. But it was a complete family: the mother, the father, the daughter, the son, and uh, anyway, it was actually very good food. So I got a bowl of food, and you could see how they put it together. What would you like? A little of this, a little of that, and they then you pay them. And but it's very inexpensive. But this is how they make a living. So here, this was in this town called Canto in the Mekong Delta. This was a prison that was from the days of of the French running it. A Vietnamese guard who happened to be a young Vietnamese guard in his garb standing around. And so I said, "Can I take a picture of you?" No problem. But if you look in the background, his electrical system in his office, everything is open. There's nobody concerned about safety of anything. So here we are again in Canto, and so this guy's recycling computers. He's got his little moped, which everybody's got a moped or a little 50, 90cc bike that everything moves on. So now we're heading north. We were leaving the Mekong Delta area, going up to Nha Trang. Nha Trang is one of the more interesting places you're going to see. So Nha Trang, when they built these beautiful 5-star hotels, they built these for the Chinese to come, and the Chinese, because Vietnam is right next to China, but the Vietnamese built it thinking the Chinese would come, and they came for a few years. But right now there's a great conflict between the Vietnamese and the Chinese. So the Vietnamese built all these structures and all these hotels, but the Chinese aren't coming. So these hotel rooms are spectacular, beautiful hotel rooms for $25 a night, for $30 a night. I mean, it's for an American, it is so unbelievably cheap. This hotel we stayed in, if you look on the far side, the top up there is a swimming pool. Okay, there's the swimming pool, right? So $25 a night, beautiful 5-star hotel, swimming pool on the roof, but Chinese aren't coming. So this is again from our hotel room looking out at the ocean. This is the name of the hotel. There's Dave, but you can see the extravagance of the hotel. I mean, marble, huge ceilings. I mean, it's a first-class place. So here we are again, the train looking out and just looking at the evening. People were flying kites and walking around, just enjoying themselves. But you only see Vietnamese. Again, this is looking back in Nha Trang. Nha Trang moved most of the Vietnamese fishermen to this area, have moved them out of the town because they didn't want them in the town area where the hotels are. This is as we start to leave Nha Trang a little bit going up. You can see a more traditional Vietnamese harbor where the local fishermen fish. So what do they do with the fish? They got 100 people cleaning them and you know processing them, but they have labor everywhere. So labor is continuously working on cleaning fish and processing it. But that's where their food is being made. And what I was trying to tell you before, was that the Vietnamese and the Chinese is the conflict was overfishing because the Chinese basically put what's called a 9-dash line along the coast of Vietnam and said that this is our Chinese fishing area. Well, the Vietnamese have been fishing here for 1,000 years and longer, and they're saying no, this is ours. So that's where the conflict is. But the Vietnamese right here, this is what they do for a living is fish, and they separate every fish and they process them. And because it's hot there or it's warm, you've got to keep the fish cold on these boats. So here was a guy coming in with a slug of ice. And so I thought this is interesting. So they have these blocks of ice that come down, they put them on these crappy old motorcycle carts. They take them over to a shredder, and you can see this guy's got a plastic bag on his back, and he's shoving it into this hole that shreds the ice that goes into the blue boat you can see in the background. So when they go out fishing, they can put the fish on top of the ice. I mean, it's an unbelievably crude but functional process on how all of this works, but it's all labor intensive. So as we're leaving the train, so we asked our taxi driver, please tell us how people make a living. So first place he took us to was an incense, this family that makes incense, and this is their way of making a living. And this was their processing of, they put cinnamon in with this. I don't know how they made it, but anyway, how they make incense. Um, there was another woman next to us here who was trying to make some money on some fruit from her garden, because everyone's trying to eke out a small living. This is a family here, a daughter and a mother who were making grass mats, and so I ended up buying a few of these, but they just sit here and make these grass mats. So as we go, these are water buffalo in rice fields. I mean, the fields, as you now start to leave the coast and we're going into what's called the Central Highlands area. This is the middle of Vietnam. It gets to be prettier in a lot of different areas because tourists, nobody goes here, but you can see it's a spectacular, beautiful place in lots of different ways. So we stopped at one of these. There was our taxi driver who we spent 5 days with. We hired him, the guy with a cigarette in his mouth, but we stopped at this little stand and people are trying to sell whatever they've got to anybody. But the interesting thing, the reason I'm showing this is that you've got they're selling their food. 20 feet away, they've got a gasoline container with a pump on the top of it. So if you come by with your moped, you buy your 1 liter container of gasoline that you put into the moped and you drive on. But the place stank of gasoline. I mean, and here we got the taxi driver smoking a cigarette, and 10 feet away, I've got an open container of gasoline that they're dispensing. I mean, it's safety or thinking about safety is something that nobody ever thinks about. I mean, here's their farming vehicles, you know, when they're driving to the farms and doing anything, you can see how old and crude, and because again, for you know, 40,000 or 35, 40,000 Vietnamese dong to the dollar. So how many dong can you make a day? And so then what do you spend it on? I mean, the poverty there is just incredible, but they're very resilient people. I mean, they're hardworking and they do really well. This was a pepper tree. I had never seen a pepper tree before, but though it was a obviously pepper pods. So we got to the next town and I see these guys standing there with his black. And I said to the taxi, what the hell are they doing here? And he said, well, they're processing pepper. So they take the pepper pods and they take the little beads off and they roast it. And anyway, this is pepper. Right now, these young kids are putting together and they're putting into bags. And there was a couple of ladies there that were sewing these bags shut. And so they said, well, here, you sew it shut. And well, I didn't do a really good job, but anyway, they took back over and but these are 70-kilo bags of pepper pods that will be sold and processed for pepper. And right next to where we're standing, I see these kids that are fishing. Somebody I'd never seen before, fishing with a battery. So this kid's got a battery, a Group 27 standard car battery on his back, and he's got this stick. At the end of it is an electrical charge, and so what they're looking for is to, if they see fish or anything that moves, they stun it with the electrical charge. Anyway, just interesting. So we're now in a town called Bo Matot, which really doesn't mean anything to anybody, didn't mean anything to me, but this was the town where Ho Chi Minh Trail, as the in the days of the Vietnam War, when the war shifted and the Americans were losing to the North Vietnamese, this was the town in the Central Highlands area of Vietnam where the turn came, because the Vietnamese came down Ho Chi Minh Trail through Laos and came back into Vietnam here in this town. And the town is famous for that. They've got some tanks and things sitting around, but the middle of town, they've got a big, they're very proud of the fact that the North Vietnamese came through here and finally took Vietnam over, or took Vietnam back. But this was the turning point, this town. So there's the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Just to give you a little bit of idea, you can see the town of Buon, Mid Tot. That's where they came into. And when they started to come down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, coming to South Vietnam, meaning the North Vietnamese, when they started to take over southern Vietnam. But that town was very, very important. The area we're in right now, I've showed this slide only because these are all the ethnic tribes that live in this area. There's so many names of these ethnic tribes, and you can see why, everybody fights each other because nobody wants to get along with the next tribe. But every one of these dots is a different tribe. So as we're going through, we stopped to look, how do they make rice? Not rice, how do they make rice noodles? This was another family who made rice noodles for the restaurants. So they make the noodles and then they hang them on these poles, and they put them out in the sun to dry. And these are the rice noodles that you buy. But you always think they come out of big manufacturing plants, but a lot of these you're going to start to see are just families that have little businesses. So here's an interesting picture. This family was making mushrooms. This is a mushroom farm. Hard to imagine this, but those containers you see are plastic containers that they put dirt into. Then they put spores of mushrooms inside that. And this is a very wet area. So the bags with the dirt and the spores inside, they keep it moist in there because it is normally very, very hot. But the mushrooms grow out of the end. And so this is a mushroom growing, a family that grows mushrooms, that sells mushrooms, how they make their money. But it's just very interesting.
The bags, that's the mushrooms.
Yeah, those are plastic bags and like I said, full of dirt. And then they put a hole in the middle of it, put the spores in and water and dirt and moisture. And before you know it, mushrooms grow. So got to another family's home, and this family makes drums. These are papaya trees that they cut into pieces, and this guy makes drums. Just another way for a family to make some money. So the hides there, those are water buffalo hides that they use for the top of the drums, but these are ceremonial drums that they make. So as we're going, another place we stopped at, this was the picture behind me that you saw a few minutes ago of the banyan tree. This is the river that in the rainy season is very big and that goes by that banyan tree where you saw them at the roots. Anyway, they're formed behind me. It's just a beautiful area. With water. There's the banyan tree that I was trying to explain before. So it is in the riverbed. And so when the rainy season comes, the water comes up and goes by this banyan tree. And over, I don't know how many hundreds of years, the roots started to form around the rock. And it just made this amazing, amazing collage of roots. Another place we stopped at was I wanted to understand how do they make these bricks. So here's a place that makes bricks for building because almost every building you see in Vietnam has these red bricks that they use for a base. Well, this is the mud brick that they collect, and you can see on the right hand side the guy in a tractor up there scooping the mud. Then they add coal dust, the black coal dust to it. And it's a combination of the brick mud and the coal dust. And then it gets squeezed through. This is the coal dust. The guys pushing the coal dust up on the conveyor belt that starts to make these bricks. But if you look at their feet again, I mean, they are wearing flip-flops in coal. The conditions are horrendous, but nobody is unhappy. Everybody's happy to be working. So these are the building blocks that this factory makes. And this is how it originally comes out before it gets fired. So it sits in the sun to kind of semi-dry. And then they put them into these large kilns, and then they fire the bricks, and then the bricks turn red. But these are the building blocks for almost all the homes that you're going to see. This lady who worked in this factory, she got a hold of me, and she just was so enamored with me that oh, she wanted to come anyway. Very nice lady. And but you can see, I mean, what does she do all day? She works in coal dust and in this environment, but not unhappy people. Another interesting thing, here we are on a river, and so to get across the river, normally the government would have to build a bridge. Well, the government doesn't have any money. They don't build the bridges, so the locals built their own bridge. And the bridge, though, only stays for 9 months of the year. When the water comes up, a large part of the bridge gets swept away and they have to rebuild it every year. But what you end up having is it's a quick way for a local to get across from one side of the river to the other, but it's a homemade bridge. So this is the transport place. So there are two guys standing there, and as you zip by, you give them a few Vietnamese dong and you continue on. So this family owns this bridge. When it gets knocked down, they have to rebuild it, but they make money from letting people go back and forth. I mean, it very, very entrepreneurial. And some of these people don't even stop. They just continue to drive and just hand the guy money. You can see how much money the guy's got in his hand. So we continued on. Typical meat market in a Vietnamese town. I mean, everything is open and sitting out. I mean, you got to remember it's probably 80 degrees, maybe 85 degrees, but all of this pork and all of the beef and everything is sitting out. And the ladies are waiting for somebody to come by, a local to come by to buy their groceries. Like some chicken. I mean, you got to have a swatter to keep the flies off. So the ladies got there, want to buy chicken feet or or chicken parts, but you can see all the ladies sitting around. I mean, it's just it's a scene that would be hard. It's hard to imagine. I mean, here, you've got a piece of cardboard down to soak up the blood. And so, you've got 85 degrees, but this lady is nice. She's proud of what she's doing. She's nicely dressed. She's a nice looking lady, and she's got her pork out there. What would you like to buy today? So we've further on tried to figure out, this is coconuts. How do they process coconuts? And there are taxi drivers showing us how to cut coconuts. And so this was a machine that went around, and you would take the coconut shell and you would shove it up against that, and then you get the white coconut that goes into the bowl, and that's what they sell. But they also sell the coconut juice. So it's another way for another family to make some money. Yeah, here we are. This is a rice field. I'd never really seen a rice field before, but the rice, this is actually rice in the field. So I showed you initially about bamboo. So bamboo, when it grows, it doesn't grow straight. So here was another family, and their whole way to make money is to straighten bamboo. And so they get these loads of bamboo in, they're all crooked and everything. And how do you straighten bamboo? With heat. So you can see there that there is a fire inside of this little metal box, and the guy puts the crooked bamboo in, and heats the bamboo in the backside of it. Depending on which direction he has to heat it, he puts a little sling around it to put pressure on it, and that he works every piece of bamboo to make it straight so they can sell it. I mean, there's the coals. It's we look at straight bamboo like I showed you before on the buildings when they make scaffolding and stairs and all these different things, but this is the laborious task of making bamboo straight. So another little family who's got a processing facility. They're making, again, noodles. Everybody eats noodles, so you see a lot of families. No matter how crude it looks, the end result is they have rice noodles that they make and sell it. This lady was in charge of this facility. She'd been there many, many years. She was the matriarch, obviously, and very, very nice lady. And anyway, ended up showing us around. So I needed a shave. So the family on one side, they're making rice noodles. On the other side, the husband's cutting hair for people. So, I sat down and got a haircut. And the family, just the sweetest family. You can see they all wanted to have pictures with us. But, I'm just under 6 feet, and you can see, I mean, I'm like a giant amongst these people. But anyway. There is a great family. So families also play lottery. These are lottery tickets you see everywhere in Vietnam. here we are at another, this was, oh, they were making rice, the rice paper that you put around food to eat with. So they have the material, the rice paper, they make it flat, they put it on these bamboo mats, and the bamboo mats go outside in the sun, and during the day they dry, and the next day they sell these rice paper mats to put food into whatever you're eating, the rice or anyway, another family making money. There are the rice paper. Continued on, and so typical Buddha everywhere, large Buddha statues, and next to the Buddha statue was a wood processing place where they're making furniture. So these guys, everyone's got a cigarette in their mouth, but they're carving things for furniture. But you can see very labor intensive, what are they wearing? Flip-flops, making a few Vietnamese dong, and this gets attached to a bed or some other furniture. This is just another pretty area that we found. It was a river that was flowing down. We hiked up the river. Continuing on, came across a rubber plantation. I'd never seen anything so big. It went on for kilometers, these trees, but they end up cutting the tree and collecting the rubber from the tree, but that's how they make money. This was a interesting place. It was a rock, they called it Elephant Rock. It was in the Central Highlands area, just a piece of granite that came out of the ground, just interesting looking. Another lake, we ended up staying at this hotel by a lake, and I woke up the next morning, walked outside with my coffee, and here was an elephant walking around. So anyway, they use the elephants for a lot of different things, and also to pull things, to move people around. Anyway, but a lot of elephants in that area. The hotel in the background there is where we ended up staying, but it was just on the edge of this lake. So the lake, not super impressive or anything, but nobody on it. So there's a guy who wants to take us out, so fine, take us out. So he pulls us out into the middle of the lake, which is not super interesting. This is one of the older houses on the lake, and you can see they build it off higher because in this summertime during the wet season, the water comes up and comes up to the underside of their houses. This is the lake again from another angle. People living on the lake, eking out a little living, trying to make some money, fishing, catching some fish, but it looks like Lake Shasta, but it's not. So at the lake here, as we're driving across, I see this, and at first I can't believe what it is, but it turns out that they fillet the fish and then dry it in the sun. And again, another family making money. They are selling this to the locals. This is called dragon fruit. You can see the picture of what dragon fruit is. What we see is that white fruit. Anyway, this is what the dragon plant looks like. And I like cactuses and I like succulents, and it had a beautiful flower at the end of it. But that beautiful flower eventually turns red, and that produces the dragon fruit. This is a quick, interesting. The last emperor of Vietnam was the gentleman on the right-hand side. His name is Bo Dai. And the gentleman on the left, his name is Ho Chi Minh. And this is 1946. Ho Chi Minh and became obviously the dictator, the guy who ruled, the communist dictator, and Bo Dai, which was the last emperor of Vietnam. And Bo Dai, the emperor there, he lived in a town called Dalat. And Dalat is where we are now. So this was his presidential palace, where he would sit in his place. There's Dave. We're inside of Bodai's place, and this is where he would meet different dignitaries from around the world, up until 1945 when he left. But Bodai was one of the worst emperors near the end there, because he had really no interest in running the country. He had a lot of concubines. He was involved with the French. He'd go back to France and he had a mistress there. He was not interested in running the country, so the country went to hell. And eventually what happened is the communists took over. So, but Bo Dai was a playboy, but this was his house. So here's the last emperor. So they dressed me up. They dressed me up in Bo Dai's outfit. So anyway, and that's it.
Very good.
That is another part of the world that is interesting, that has lots of interesting things available to it.
Absolutely.
Very-
That was great.
Barry, I don't understand how you cannot get sick when I see the way they process their food.
Well, okay, I've got a policy when I travel. If it doesn't pop and it doesn't fizzle, I don't drink it. All right.
Bernie,
So,
how
Or
safe?
eat it.
How safe did you feel there as a foreigner?
Oh my God, they're such nice people, Scott. They're just, I felt no hostility, I have more problems going to East San Jose and feeling threatened than I do in all of Vietnam.
Yeah.
Vietnam is just all of Asia. The people are more interested in you. How do you live? What are you doing? They want to engage you, and I'm interested in them. And that I never ever felt hostility, Scott.
In Brazil or Latin America in general, you stand out as